Welcome back, everybody. Well done. Did you have a lovely lunch? Yes, say yes if you did. Yes. Where did you have your lovely lunch? Because I was trying desperately to find it somewhere, but I did find it in the end. Good, I'm glad. And welcome back. So we're going to be talking immediately, right now, about business travel. Now, this is something that we should all be aware of. I suspect many of us have come here on that ticket of business travel. And this is really asking the question, is business travel leading change? Is MICE actually recovering and also helping to lead change? Because in a way, if businesses aren't showing a good example, then who else can? So, companies around the world are looking to the business travel sector to take the lead on sustainability. And the organizations that are on the panel, who are about to come up, we will spotlight what they're doing. They think they are doing positive things, and I'm sure they are, but we'll hear a bit more about that. And then we'll hear a collective discussion between them as to how we can move faster forward. Before I do that, before I introduce the panel, it's my great pleasure to introduce on the stage somebody who will give some opening thoughts on the way that she thinks business travel is going and how it's leading the way. So please welcome, to make a short presentation, Maribel Rodriguez, the Vice President of Membership of the WTTC.
Thank you very much. I hope you have a great meal. It's great to be back in Seville. Yes, before we start our panel, let me introduce WTTC. Hello everyone, good family faces here, friend faces. WTTC, we are an organization that represents the private sector globally. And the reason why I'm telling you that is because we are speaking in behalf of these people, okay? What we are doing is basically represent the interests of the companies at a worldwide level by sector and geography. And to do that, for over the 30 last years, we have been doing studies that are analyzing the impact of travel and tourism globally. You know, what are we measuring is the GDP, the global GDP, how we are impacted in travel and tourism when it comes to economic, and then how many jobs and employment. And since we exist, we are, thinking about what is the economy value of the travel and tourism, how can we grow our policies in a sustainable, way, and how we can all together work in a, better direction for companies. Our strategic priorities are three. I'm going to be quick on that because it's just for setting up the context. We want to amplify the voice of the sector. We are not only, an organization, and the companies are not only, for you to travel and provide, services and transportation. It's more than that. We are bringing economic value. We are bringing, social impact. We are advocating. And we support the growth of the sector, doing, commercial opportunities, discussing about the frictionless travel, talking about investment, technology. But all we do, we need to be doing within a framework of sustainable growth. We are going to be growing over the next few years in a very high, percentage, and this needs to lead to a sustainable growth if we want to keep, our growing path. Before we move on and talk about, the topic of today, some numbers, comparing 2022 last year and 2019, before pandemic, 1 out of 10 jobs become to travel and tourism, one of each $10. We were about $10 trillion, economy impact in society with 334 million jobs. 2022, we catch up and we were about to, to reach up to, the levels of 2019, but still a little bit behind. Still because many other, countries and locations didn't, for example, China was not yet open. But, as you can see, the global results were going back. We have a pent-up demand. International and domestic travel growth a lot. And again, our sector very resilient came back. But what we do is to always looking ahead. How we do that? We are always forecasting 10 years growth, and we wanted to show you a little bit of those numbers. This year we are going to finalize more or less with $9.5 trillion, which is a little bit behind to 2019, but catching up, as I said to you before, because some countries, like for example China, wasn't open, is already now open. They are back to travel, and Chinese market, for example, they represent the 15% of the global expenditure. So when we catch up, it's going to be quite similar. But we have to look to the future. And the future is that we are going to be growing by 5.8% over the next few years, which is above the average of the global economy. So by 2033, we are going to employ 430 million jobs. That's a lot. That is the power of our sector. You have some figures about expenditure, international versus domestic. If you see international is going to be by, multiplied by 2, and domestic as well, very important and very well balanced, if I may say. Talking about tourism and business today, as we all know, during the pandemic, as you see in the figures there, everything calm down, business and leisure travel. But again, when everything and companies and we all start traveling back again, leisure travel started to do a little bit. The pent-up demand for the leisure travel was higher, even though the business traveler started in a most moderate way. But if you see in the figures, very similar to what we were when in 2019. The consumer trends that we did a study recently with Deloitte and some of our industry partners, we took some takeaways. For example, social media decision for those travelers, increased tendency of blended trips. When you are traveling right now, it's not only about going to work, it's about traveling and and enjoying as well the cities. And we are very focused on innovation in digitalizations. We are a little bit more flexible, as you all know, because the seamless travel was very important when we had COVID. Very quick and just some bit for thought. We are as well doing studies and measuring economical and social reporting. Why? Because in the next few years, sustainability is at the top of the agenda of every leader, from companies, from governments, and we have created this new data, which is showing up the following. For example, in 2019, we were ramping up to 8.1% of impacting, when it comes to environment and global footprint of global emissions. But the good news are that we are now decoupling. The sector is growing, but the impact is not growing at the same level. It means that we are doing the things okay. We need to still doing better, but the sector is taking actions. It's why we are here today in this event to talk about sustainability and sustainable growth, and those figures are for you to think about it. So saying that, by sector as well, we can analyze a little bit more in deep if you want later. Transportation is a big stake out of the impact in sustainable travel, but as well hospitality. It's good to put some numbers because we need to track when we are analyzing where we go. It's good to know where we were and where we want to go. And with this data that WTTC has been creating, it's going to be very important for our following up. So again, some other report we just launched. Sustainable aviation fuel, very important. We know that this is the way to go for airlines. There is no other solution for the moment. And if we want to get to a decarbonization by 2050, that's the only way. We are calling to the governments to support this and the hotel sustainability basics. We are doing together with our fellow member Radisson. I have seen some Radisson people today here, so thank you for joining. It's very important that we are all aligned to look after the efficiency, look after the planet and our people. And with this, I'm going to go and let you, again, continue the conversation. Thank you very much. And I hope to see you now in the panel and open for discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Maribel. Take a seat, please, at the end. Thank you. And while you're there, Maribel, you were talking, keep going, sorry, it's fine. You were talking about leisure, blended trips. Now, of that 20% that do business trips that you were talking about, so it's 80 leisure, 20 business, of that 20%, how much of those trips are blended trips?
Probably those are in the leisure, because if you are extending the stay and if you are doing, trips, mix probably will be in that other direction. But more and more, and not only that, think about the digital nomads. Think about other ways of traveling, and mostly as well about conference. Here today we are all the rooms are full. I just came from World Roots in Istanbul. Things are happening now in the UK. Actually, this segment of MICE and congresses is growing a lot, which is a great thing to keep analyzing and keeping an eye on it.
Can I just ask, actually, people here, how many of you here have thought about or have taken a blended trip? In other words, a business trip with a leisure trip. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Okay. I'll give you credit. You're leading the way. Excellent. Okay, let me bring the rest of the panel on. Can I please bring on stage Catherine Logan, who is Regional Senior Vice President of EMEA and APAC, it's a long title, Catherine, for the for the GPTA, who is the Global Business Travel Association. Welcome. Take a seat. Catherine. Also, can I please bring back on, you saw him before lunch. Actually, no, before him, I'm going to go to Raymond first. To Raymond Gruntin, who is the Director, Regional Affairs Department for Europe, IATA. Welcome on. Thanks, my friend. Take a seat. And yes, sorry, you saw him before lunch. Jason Dunderdale, who is Global Head of Agency Sales for Blacklane. And last but not least, we have Eloisa Urrutia Mono, I hope I pronounced that correct, who is Head of Sustainability, Strategy and Solutions for Amex Global Biz Travel. Welcome. Thank you. Okay, so what I want to establish first of all with all of you is give me an idea of how business travel in your sector is recovering, but also tell me that it's recovering, or tell me if it's recovering sustainably. I want to start with you, Catherine. So number one, is the premise true? Is business travel really showing the way when it comes to sustainable travel? Tell us.
Okay, so you first asked about is business travel recovering?
Yep.
And we do an annual study called the Business Travel Index Outlook. And so basically what we do is we look at economic indicators and then we try to forecast what business travel spend will be. And what we found in 2022 is absolutely business travel is coming back very, very strongly, far more strongly than we anticipated. We thought that the financial headwinds, as you know, I think anybody who was going into 2022 was expecting like mass financial crisis and an economic downturn. And while there were some headwinds there, it wasn't to the same extent. So we think that business travel grew by 47% in 2022 to over $1 trillion. We have revised our forecast going forward. We're expecting another 32% growth in business travel. And then in 2023, and by 2024, we think spend will be at pre-pandemic levels.
So 2019 levels, basically.
2019 levels, yeah. Now, and in Europe, Western Europe itself, business travel rebounded by over 100% in 2022. So yes, it is back. Now, note I keep saying spend. It's not the same as volume. Last year we also saw massive inflation right across the board. So our airfares have gone up by 70%. Hotels have gone up. Our accommodation's gone up by 30%, and ground is around about 10%. So it's not straight volume. And and what we see from our members, we also do a study. It's the second time we've done a report to see what their thoughts are around sustainability, and for 91% of our members, our buyer members, sustainability is a priority. It's something that they are being tasked to look at, tasked to measure, tasked to improve. And in Europe, it's actually 98% of buyers. So it absolutely is a priority and certainly something that's being looked at carefully.
Now, Catherine, as a corporate travel planner and buyer, I presume one of the greatest pressures on you is to keep your costs down, right? So who's telling them be more sustainable? Who's telling them keep your costs down? How's that working?
Yeah, I think it is. It is definitely a tension. And in the same report that I referred to, where people had prioritized sustainability, whenever they were asked for what are the barriers to more sustainable travel, cost is absolutely one of them. And I think if you were to think about it, a more sustainable option would be to take a direct flight as opposed to one with a connection. But if your travel policy says that you've got to take the lowest logical fare, then that may not be the cheapest option. And so what we are, in terms of the best practice that we are communicating to our members, is you've got to look at your travel policy and make sure that it does allow for things that are maybe not as cost effective, or if sustainability is going to be a priority, there has to be a recognition of the carbon cost as well, and that needs to be factored in.
So ultimately, at the moment, if you had to say this, I know there's 98% want to do this, but actually the reality is how many companies are pursuing sustainability first policies when it comes to corporate travel?
I think that there are. It's definitely a priority for 98% of buyers.
So the desire is there. The desire.
Yeah. So I think there are things that there's support that's going to be needed. So at the minute, if you were to say, okay, so I said cost is a barrier. Other barriers are around harmonized data and and harmonized standards. And so our members are also seeking that support so that they can properly measure the impact of their travel. And if you think about what you need to do to reduce the environmental impact of your travel, the first question is, should we travel? For a GBTA, we know that business travel is a force for good. It is something that drives economies. It's something that creates jobs. It builds relationships and international understanding. And so, therefore, it is absolutely not something that you go, okay, right, no more business travel, because we know we know the ramifications of that. And certainly while there may be some trips that could be avoided, that, say maybe in 2019, day trips were, were not something that was questioned or frowned upon. Now, over a third of our buyers are questioning, if somebody's just going somewhere for one meeting, a trip for one meeting, and it requires an additional level of approval or ROI. So it's more. I think the first question is, should you travel? So should the trip happen? And so it's a lot more purposeful. Then the second thing is, how do you travel in the most environmentally friendly way, or how do you conduct that trip in the most friendly way? And so that could be, as I say, a direct flight as opposed to one with a connection. That could also be that instead of taking a flight, you take the train where it's appropriate. So some of our members would have policies that under a certain number of hours you would take the train. Then there's things about the suppliers who you work with. So a vast majority of our members now have got sustainability questions within their RFPs, within the criteria. So they're looking for they're using that as part of their selection for suppliers, and so so by doing these various things, and then I think probably the final thing that not many members are doing it at the minute, but it's certainly something that's planned for in the future, is that that there's a carbon budget or a carbon fee. So not only is there a financial cost whenever you're booking your trip, but there's also potentially a budget that your department has that if you use it, you've got to go and ask for some more, and you've got to explain why you need it.
Yeah.
Or you maybe are charged a carbon fee.
We're going to definitely talk about that more, and certainly with Eloisa, we're going to talk about that. The whole notion of a carbon budget is an interesting one. I know Microsoft, I think, used that policy. Just one thing. What about Zoom then? Because obviously during the pandemic, Zoom was the predominant means. And you're suggesting that although the expenditure is up to 2019 levels, because of inflation, actually the number of trips is lower. So is Zoom still playing a big part?
Yeah, I do. I think that Zoom has a role to play. You know, I think we all, this is what I describe as we all had like an actually intense boot camp in the like first 6 months of 2020, where we all learned how to communicate and conduct meetings virtually. And you know, if you think about the quality of a like a video meeting, you know, Zoom meeting versus a conference call where you're all, you know, sat on speakerphone, the quality of that is better. But it's not the way in which you're going to build a relationship with somebody. It is not the way in which it facilitates and it helps, and in some cases can be a replacement. But it is not the way in which to build trust in the same way as you do whenever you're in person. And if you think about the richness of the interaction that comes from being in the same room, or having a cup of coffee with somebody, or going for dinner, you can't do that over Zoom. And
Let me interrupt you there, but who wants to do a $1 billion deal without meeting a person face to face?
Sure. But not all deals are $1 billion deals.
1 million is okay as well. I mean, it's there are some deals that you need to see, and the trust and travel. I think Zoom is a combination. It's a good asset to have. We can prep for this event doing some Zoom, and then we are all here together. It's a mix.
Okay.
Yeah, but I would also say though that the mix of travel is changing. You know, because you talk about Zoom and the technology or the change in technology that has facilitated a change in the way we work. So there are lots of people who no longer work in an office; they work remotely, and so the makeup of travel spend. A lot more of it is around training and seminars than it was. You know, that's now the number one reason why people are traveling, as opposed to sales is close behind it, but that is suddenly a lot higher on the list of reasons to travel.
Sure.
And for people who are recruiting, especially people who are new to the workforce, if they never have a chance to meet their colleagues and build the relationships, like I know the joy I get from the relationships that I have with my colleagues within GBTA, but also it's great. I've been able to have a great catch up with Jason. We see each other probably about 4 times a year at various events, but would we sit down and have a Zoom call and have a chat? No, it's when you're in person, and it's the sort of thing that actually helps to build a passion for a job and make you better at it.
I understand. We're not going to rehearse the argument about Zoom versus business travel. But what is interesting is that Zoom has had an effect, and that it is useful and it has replaced some business travel, because sometimes it wasn't necessary to travel in the first place. Very good. Raymond, now you represent the sector which is in the full glare of the spotlight when it comes to carbon emissions in the travel industry, as we know, and we've discussed this morning as well. We know all this. So tell me, just first of all, what's the evidence that you have that business travel is rebounding, is coming back?
So thanks very much. What we don't see the purpose of the travel, so probably Catherine is much better to answer that question of the rebouncing of business travel. But what we see is that travel generally is rebouncing, and what we can also see that the business class segment is rebouncing nicely.
Yep.
Obviously, it doesn't tell what is the purpose of the travel. So, but travel is coming back, and we are almost at the pre-pandemic levels. So there is a demand.
Some people might be surprised that you don't know the purpose of a travel trip. I mean, don't you do surveys after passengers leave the aircraft, or you never ask?
Airlines probably do as well, but as IATA, I wouldn't know what is the purpose of the travel.
Fine. Now you have 287 members, I believe. Is that right? And I think you handle 84%. They handle 84% of business travel. Yeah. What is the state of play right now with sustainable aviation fuel? Tell me, because that's what we were talking about. And you were here. You saw before lunch what Jean-Louis Barrault was saying. What is the situation with that?
So sustainable aviation fuels, it's a very good question, because as some of the speakers have referred to flying at zero by 50 commitment, which, mind you, is a global commitment. So we're not talking about the European ambition. We're talking about the global industry commitment, which is very, very important. And more than 60% of the carbon emissions would actually come from sustainable aviation fuels. So that makes it extremely important component to the pathway to net zeros. And the stage at the moment is that currently in 2022 we have produced 300 million liters of sustainable aviation fuels globally. To give a picture of the magnitude, what we need to do to achieve the tipping point, achieving the milestone by 2050 of neutral growth. By 2030, we need to have a 30 billion liters. So it's really, really much more. So at the moment, we're talking about 0.1% of the whole fuel supply. So it is quite poor. There are good initiatives put in place. There are some states and some governments that see the value and that have proactively invested in various projects, but actually it is very, very scarce. So we are somewhat concerned about availability of stuff. To sustainability, there are much more, obviously. It's not only about environmental sustainability, it's also about the financial sustainability, of course. And as you, Captain, said, I mean, the sustainability is more than just a couple of goals. It is, the UN is very clear about, what industry is striving to achieve. So it's just one component I would like to make that sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
You saw what Jean-Louis was saying. He was sitting just here, and he was saying that they are nowhere near achieving sustainable aviation fuel targets by 2050. Nowhere near. We haven't got the tech. We haven't got the supplies. And we need to double the price of tickets in order to raise the money to create the situation where we have sustainable alternatives. What do you say to that?
Well, I think actually he was referring to fly net zero target in general. So as SAF is the main pillar of achieving it. So obviously the focus is on SAF, but there are also other avenues. For example, new technology, which is a significant percent infrastructure. And as you probably know, that aviation covers its all infrastructure cost basically by itself. If you build railways or roads, then taxpayers are paying for that. But if you're basically using air infrastructure, consumer pays for that. I think there are possibilities and there are opportunities, but I think we need to work much closer with the governments. And I think the responsibility comes not only to operators, but also to regulators.
Yeah.
And just to give you a simple picture of the infrastructure in Europe. Europe has been talking about single European sky for 25 years. We're still not there. I mean, how come states cannot agree on that? If that would be the case, we could reduce emissions by 6% already. So that is political decision as well. And what we see from the industry perspective, that there is a lot of populistic reactions. For example, you say, oh, let's impose a green taxation. I have a couple of Nordic countries. I used to be based in Stockholm before, so I know kind of policies around Scandinavian countries quite well. Introducing a green tax, so to say. So when we're asking, so where would that green tax go to? So, well, it will go to the general budget to support elderly people, for example. So what does that do with sustainability?
Yeah.
So, but if you find the right mechanisms to raise the funds to channel your taxation to the right purposes, earmark that for sustainability, there is absolutely a chance. I don't think that we have any choice, actually, to be quite full.
I'm going to pose you this last question before we move on. In the name of sustainability, do IATA members support the policy of the French government which bans all domestic aviation?
Yeah, if we support, well, it's an interesting, as for anti-modality, I think if there is an existing infrastructure that enhances the experience of the passenger, I think it makes sense. Where does it make sense? But if you are talking about building new infrastructure where it doesn't exist, then I would argue that probably the carbon offsetting of developing new infrastructure would be much, much more harmful to environment than actually flying the destination on electrical flights or on sustainable aviation fuels. And by the way, electrical flights for short distances, small groups of people are reality. Norway is actually implementing that next year, connecting passengers from small islands. So it has to make sense for consumers' perspective, we have to have a choice. But banning it just for populistic reasons, I don't think that makes sense. When in France you have a great infrastructure, so yes, if you can connect to international flights easily using rail, then probably it makes sense.
Okay, thank you. Jason, we were talking before the break about about the way that your company works, and I think business is your main customer, essentially, isn't it? Businesses are your main customers.
50% of our revenue is B2B and 50% is individuals or B2C.
Okay, but even those people are probably business people in a way, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean,
would have
I'm
thought
glad
so.
somebody else is thinking that because I tell my business that all the time.
Okay.
But yeah, absolutely.
But explain to us, I mean, for those who weren't here before lunch and Jason was talking about the Black Lane model, what is it and how much are you promoting sustainability? And also, you should tell us, are you seeing a lot more trips recently? And we have to presume that they're business trips, a lot of them. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if I answer the last question
Yeah.
first of all, absolutely. We've seen a huge increase post-pandemic. In fact, we're now seeing nearly every month, if we're looking back at 2019 figures, we're doing way more volume, probably 25% more volume than we were doing pre-pandemic. So people are definitely starting to, they're definitely using, Black Lane as a mode of transport. Our model is we're a chauffeur operating service. So we essentially are connecting people with a chauffeur network that we vetted and that we have partners globally.
And let's talk about electric vehicles. What proportion, I know you told me before lunch, but tell me again, what proportion of your trips are done by electric vehicles?
So at the moment, we are trending towards 10%, which sounds low, but actually when you look at it across the industry, we're actually up the top end of the market. And as you said before the break, it's not the number of EVs that we have at our disposal, it's how we utilize them and making sure that the majority of our trips where we can are in an EV. As we said, in London, 1 in 4 trips are done in an EV.
Yeah, and the issue you quite often have is the availability of chargers, things like that, the infrastructure around the whole EV industry, yeah. Would you say that electric vehicles are the only alternative, or are there other possibilities?
At the moment, EVs are pretty much the only alternative we can go for. Do I think that it's going to be EVs only? I mean, that's a discussion that we could probably have for much longer than we have now today.
People talk about hydrogen, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, I think BMW. I was in Berlin Airport last week, and BMW had one of their hydrogen fuel cell iX5s on display there. They're now putting them out there. We're certainly not anywhere near having. We're probably. Where we are with EVs now, we will probably be with hydrogen vehicles, I'd say probably in 2030. To give you an idea, in the UK, there are only 6 places that you can refuel a hydrogen car. So the infrastructure is nowhere near there. That said, you can refuel a hydrogen car within 10 minutes as opposed to 45 minutes to an hour on a battery charge. And then you've got to think about what is the impact of lithium-ion manufacturing or mining elsewhere. I mean, I read an article the other day that to create 1 ton of lithium ion, it takes 2.2 million liters of water. I mean, that's, on a large scale, it just cannot be sustainable.
Yeah. Tell me why you think your business has done so well, because it's 2012, wasn't it? It's been profitable, it is profitable now, when people could be taking different forms, because you do quite long trips. A lot of your trips are long, right? They could be covered by plane trips, they could be covered by train trips. Tell me why you think they're successful.
It's a really good question. We are relatively what you'd see probably a bit of a niche market because we're not for everybody. We're probably 20% higher price than an Uber Black, for example, in most markets. We're agile as a company on purpose, so we're asset light. We don't own any vehicles, as we said, so that means that we can move and change with different legislations and move in and out of different different countries and what have you. We do have some strategic partnerships which have really helped us to grow. So we look after Emirates in the majority of their markets for their complimentary rides that they do. Silversea Cruises is another one that we do, but at the moment, we've now over 10% of our rides are what we call a city-to-city. So we've now implemented a new service, which is a fixed price from one business district to another. So London to Birmingham, New York to the Hamptons, for example. And now 10% of our rides are now in those long distance trips. And we're able to facilitate those trips in EVs and with newer and greener vehicles to help you. And we pay, we charge people for the car, not for the seats, which I think is, obviously the more people you get in, the more sustainable and more effective it is.
Fair enough. Okay, Eloisa, you are representing the only company that looks at MICE specifically, meetings of business people. Tell us what the latest findings are with that.
Yes. So hello, everyone. Indeed, we have yesterday, I think, released our latest American Express Global Business Travel Meetings and Events forecast in IMEX in Las Vegas. We have been publishing this for the past 13 years, and it's similar to GBTA's survey or study. A great picture of the meetings and events activity across all regions and different stakeholders in the industry. And I am echoing Catherine's words and stats in almost all senses. So MICE is recovering exponentially. It was already recovering last year, I think, faster than business travel. So we were talking about Zoom. People really suffered from Zoom fatigue. People wanted to travel, to meet in person, to look in the eyes and to feel emotions. No need to expand on that. I think we all fully agree on that. And it was actually the way it researched last year. It was almost frightening, and most of the travel management companies and suppliers in the area couldn't cope actually with that. So, and this year we're seeing a very high recovery as well. So as American Express Global Business Travel, we did reach in 2022 pre-pandemic levels around spend, number of meetings and events and so on. And what the survey is saying, that 70% of respondents say that they will reach pre-pandemic levels in 2024. And a caveat to what, or a difference to what Catherine was mentioning around business travel. What we're seeing in MICE is not only an increase in spend, price, which we're all experiencing, but number of meetings. So there are more meetings and events. When I say meetings, it's MICE meetings and events. It covers all of them, just to make it shorter. We're also seeing a higher spend per meeting, and we're seeing more attendees, right? And the interesting facts or the shift we're seeing in the type of meeting that's leading this increase is it's led by internal meetings, right?
So it's companies, their staff want to see each other, and they want to go to the meeting.
Exactly. So we're seeing remote working is not an exception anymore. It's the new norm. It's an increasing new norm. And every time we meet at coffee tables or lunches, everyone shares their experience. Oh, are you working remote? Well, yes, since last year. How is it doing? Well, I go twice a week in the office. So it's really the new norm. And internal meetings now are needed to drive company culture, right? Because company culture was important, but we didn't see corporates really paying as much attention to internal meetings as they would to a client incentive trip, for instance. And now it's the opposite, right? So, and this is also linked to the fact that the whole shift in sustainability we're seeing not only in the travel or business travel sector, I would say, but in general. So we know that consumers and employees want to be associated with brands that reflect their values, and sustainability is a very important values for the new generations. So this is an important shift. We're also seeing a great increase in events, incentive events. So again, companies wanting to reward. Reward, promote their customers, clients. All right, so here you go. You can see a slide, and it's interesting if you want to scan the QR code, you'll be able to download the full forecast, which will give you a lot of very interesting indicators on the activity, regional spend policies, and so on. So I was speaking about the recovery, actually, and the internal meetings and events leading the recovery. In terms of the trends we're seeing in the forecast, which I think also links to your question, how is sustainability, what's the role of sustainability within this MICE recovery? We're seeing here two types of trends, the ongoing trends. So these are the trends we've been seeing in the past that are on the rise. And sustainability and diversity and equity and inclusion remain on the rise. We're seeing similar trends to what Catherine mentioned on sustainability requirements in RFPs. And an interesting shift we're seeing is the requirements in RFPs are not only about, is your company sustainable? So are you, saving energies? Do you have net zero goals? Do you report scope 1, 2, and 3, and so on and so forth? But do you have solutions and technology and tools to help us corporates source and plan more sustainable events, or travel more sustainably? So how can you help us do that? Do you have the technology? Do you have the skilled workforce? And that's a very, I would say, important shift, because it's not only, okay, my supply chain is sustainable, but I want to do things sustainably, right? Rest of the ongoing trends, I mentioned the internal meetings, and another one, which is again linked to the to driving corporate culture, is attendee well-being is a very important priority. In terms of emerging trends, you can read them on the slide. I would say that the most relevant are the ones around automation and simplification traction, which means we want more policies, more processes, more automation, and more technology, which leads to the second emerging trend. Meeting planners embrace more consultative roles. They have less manual and repetitive tasks, and for instance, they can be more consultative around sustainability. Choose more sustainable destinations, provide more sustainable experiences, right? So, yeah.
Okay. I want to talk about destinations, because if you were a corporate organizer, you're planning a big conference somewhere abroad for the next year, one of the things that you would consider possibly is, what is the carbon footprint of going to a certain destination and holding a meeting there? So there'd be some places which would have a low carbon footprint by having a big meeting there. There'd be others which would have a much higher footprint. Now, that on the surface seems like a good idea. And in fact, Catherine, you were telling me that there's an app which actually lets you know. Can you explain a bit more about that?
Yeah, there's a product called Troop Travel, and so basically you input where everybody's coming from, the type of destination you'd like to go to, and it tells you, or recommends where would be the least or the lowest carbon footprint. And I think to your point, exactly, people are looking for automation. They're looking for systems to help them do the right thing, And it can be, but it can also be as simple as whenever you're going online to book your travel, if you can see that a train journey or an air journey, what the carbon emissions are of each of those options, that will influence a decision. We've got a group of 40 Swedes coming to our conference in Hamburg, and they're getting a night train. That's 1/10 of the emissions of flying, And whenever those options are available and easy to choose, people will do it.
Yeah. There is the other factor, which Maribel, I guess you think about as well, which is there are some destinations which actually would benefit tremendously in other ways from having a conference come there. So, for example, a developing nation or a city which would be a good place to have a destination, because you would bring business there and maybe ideas there. So I presume that comes into it as well. Yeah?
Well, as you were talking to me, sorry.
Either.
But go ahead, Maribel.
Okay,
yeah.
sorry. No, I thought you were looking at me. Excuse me. No.
Go ahead,
You can respond because you are the expert. I was going to just mention something about what we are discussing today. And it's very important that, of course, we cannot choose if one destination is more sustainable or the other is less sustainable. That is very unfair because every destination has the same rights and opportunities, or they should. And the clients and the passengers, everybody. So who is the one that is more fair than the other? But what we have to look is to competitiveness. If, for example, now in discussion in Europe, and if we have to go through all the SAF processes, we are going to be seeing that we are uncompetitive when we relate to the USA, where the governments are really supporting companies to go through that path. We should be having the same. And that is going to really affect the rest of not only the countries, the destinations, because if you want to fly from A to B, and you can fly with SAF, but then you don't have or enough production or where to refill your plane, that is going to be difficult. And that is really important because we cannot forget that it's all about, at the end of the day, making some numbers.
You're holding the next WTTC in Rwanda. Did you think about the sustainability aspect of that?
We always think about that. We are actually leading the way because we are the first organization to produce an amazing report that is going to help us to track all of those, where we are. What we want to do in Rwanda is not only be sustainable, but is bringing opportunities, is bringing investment, and of course, social impact, which is all about. Our first time properly in Africa, we were already in South Africa, but we want to really make an impact with bringing our members, and that is as well to come with a discussion of being fair or not. There are countries that they really need to bring the power, where we need to bring the power of our summit and our members, and Rwanda would be the case.
Thank you. Eloisa, you were going to say?
I totally agree with Maribel in terms of destination. Nevertheless, there are, and this is probably a call to local authorities and local destinations, governments, to be bolder in their sustainability commitments. Because while it's true that every destination has its opportunity, we can see definitely that, and I think, I don't remember if it was in this auditorium or another one, the destination Amsterdam, for instance, was mentioned because they have taken, some years ago, a very, very a bold and courageous approach, not only in terms of travel, but overall economical with a donut approach and sustainable activities. And you can find, I don't know if I'm updated, but about 85% of 4- and 5-star hotels in Amsterdam are sustainably certified by third parties. The whole, electrical transportation and so on and so forth. So this automatically leads to an important carbon reduction and not needing to, have checklist and check things when you fly. And sorry, I'm promoting Amsterdam, but there are many other cities, of course, that are doing that. But you can see a difference. So again, a call to local authorities to address sustainability boldly, because sometimes we see destinations, for instance, smaller cities, that are super sustainable, actually. Why? Because they're promoting, local food suppliers, because you're walking from one venue to another. But they're just not talking about it. They're not conscious. So this is very, very important to take that very seriously. And this leads to something I really want to give that message as well, not only for the local authorities, but the importance of education. We're talking about different things in sustainability here, but as a leading managed travel company, our clients are corporates, right? So we have relations with over 19,000 corporates in the world. And what we're seeing is we need to educate many of them. I'm not going to say most. So message again to corporates and to everyone in the industry, education, awareness. If you educate people, you'll be able to have everyone on board and produce change, because obviously sustainability requires a big change in mindset.
Yeah. And you're right, by the way, to bring up the wider notion of sustainability and how obviously local communities, all that stuff is very important. We've only got a couple of minutes left, but I just want to throw this open. The whole idea of a carbon budget, the thing that we mentioned earlier, that Microsoft are doing, in terms of strict carbon emissions, I can't see anything wrong with that. Why doesn't everybody do that? Have carbon budgets in terms of corporate travel? Have you got any feelings on that? Any of you?
I think it's just the consistency of the data that they probably get from the supply chain.
That's the issue. the principle
That's
is
my
fine.
personal opinion. I think if
Raymond,
if
do you have
you're
any views on it?
I think aviation is covered by CORSIA, the global offsetting scheme, and the reporting on the very clear mechanisms. So for us, the global transparency is very, very important. So
Okay, fair enough.
So we've launched at American Express GBT a project on carbon budgets. Very new. It's a very new concept. So first of all, again, education, corporates understanding why, how
Yep.
is this good, but basically it's again helping them with the automation of the process and incorporating a carbon budget per ton. There's many models, so you can make carbon allocations. You can charge a fee per ton or kilogram of CO2 used by companies' travelers, and then automatically in the invoice they get an additional fee, which is the carbon budget. And at year end, this whole money is given back, let's say, to the corporation, which can do something like it can be invest in SAF, it can be any sustainability related or carbon offsets,
Yeah.
carbon removals.
We're getting into the world of carbon offsetting a little bit,
What?
which is I think getting more controversial as time goes on. I mean, that's
It is. You're right, but it's as everything. So if you look at greenhouse gas protocol, science-based targets initiative, they're very clear on that. There's no way we achieve net zero in 2050 without carbon budget. So carbon budget is not the solution. It is definitely not, but it is an accessory tool that is very good. Otherwise, we can't protect forests, we can't do many things. So they're not bad per se, but obviously, if a company only uses carbon offsets as a sustainable mean, it's not valid.
Yeah. So it's what you do with it, basically. And it is that issue that, as you mentioned, of measuring, which it's a recurring theme that we have this conference, is the problem with standardization and measuring. It seems to be a problem that the whole industry is constantly facing. I don't know if we'll ever get around it, but as you said, Catherine, perfection should not be the enemy of progress, or the other way around, or whatever it is. But thank you so much to the panel for this. I appreciate your contribution, your input. Could you please give a hand to the panel? Thank you.